Welcome back to the broadcast. We're discussing the Trump threat of additional tariffs. The US president announcing an additional 25% tariffs on India. Clearly, the blowback of India's continued patronage for Russian oil has had the US president threatened to impose additional tariffs, even as a protracted stance of threats of this tariff has been doing the rounds for the last few days, if not weeks now. We're also joined by Vibhuti Jha, ex-Republican candidate for the New York Assembly, with us on the broadcast. If I could come to you, Mr. Jha. If I could just ask you specifically to react to this. I know for a fact that there's been a protracted stance, of a threat of tariffs from the US side vis-a-vis India, specifically with regard to India's patronage for Russian oil. Do you see this continuing to play out through the medium term, given the fact that the most recent reaction from India's External Affairs Ministry is one where the country is choosing to double down on its economic and strategic interests? In this context, do you see this continuing for the medium term, this strain in relationships really between both the US and India now manifesting in that threat of additional tariffs?
Thank you very much for having me. And, this is not a threat. It has already been, executive order has already been signed, I believe, by Mr. Trump. So it's real. However, what is important for us to recognize that in politics and geopolitics, 7 days and 7 months are a long time. So right now, what is happening is that you are seeing Mr. Trump is using India and Indians as a happy hunting ground for everybody. So push and pressure on India, because India has a history of relenting and giving the ground. That's what he's trying, because nobody else is listening to him. I'm a Republican Party guy, but I'm also an international banker and a student of economics. So the point of the matter here is tariff is not something that was invented by Mr. Trump. It has been there for all the time. Mr. Jaishankar has also said when he assumed power that you will see a muscled approach to India's foreign relations going forward, and he has lived up to his word. So I think India is doing right by challenging Mr. Trump that you can go ahead and do what you want with the tariff-related issues, but India is going to stand firm for its own policies, for its own national sovereignty, and its own prestige and honor. This is very important. This is not the India that could be pushed at one time. But I also hasten to add here, tariff, I opined it in my own show actually, that this tariff is being used as the 21st century tool of imperialism and colonialism, which is coming back in a very interesting way. It's a global thing. So in 25% or 50% Trump tariff is not only on India, but the entire world is reeling under the impact of this scenario. So what is the reason for that? So it is basically, once again, tariff being used by the Western economies, and Trump is leading that bandwagon, to control, manage, manipulate production, manufacturing, and reuse of resources in otherwise known as the third world countries. This is what the gameplay is, in my opinion. And Mr. Sajjanhar is here. He can tell me whether I'm wrong or right. But I do believe in one. This is a bigger play. Forget about the rates. It is a reciprocal thing. And I believe India must do what is good for India. Let's not get caught into Trump did this or Trump did that, because various administrations and various presidents have done what they wanted to do. So one of the issues here is that we are also operating in a rules-based order. All the rules, institutional framework for governing the world, if I may say so, has been Western dominated. United Nations, GATT, WHO, and you name them. They are all there. So these are all crumbling signs of institutional framework. They are not living up to the standards. We all know, and without batting an eyelid, I can say, United Nations is a failed institution. Everybody knows that. WHO has failed in its own role with reference to COVID. We all know that. So GATT was established, but as you know, who pushes those rules? Who establishes the rules? So we are part of the process, and Mr. Trump is trying to upend the system. In the end, it is all about controlling, managing, manipulating the third world countries in terms of their resource use. And that's what climate change is also one about. So you are looking at a great geopolitical upheaval happening in
Right.
21st century. Trump is the president who is
Right.
leading that bandwagon. But
Absolutely,
the
Mr.
third
Jha.
world country, Sajjan Harji, आपसे मैं
Right.
पूछूंगा ये सवाल कि if you know this nomenclature, the first world countries and second world were established soon after Second World War. If you were supporting NATO and the Westerns, you were the first world. If you were CENTO, you were second world, and the rest of the world was known as the third world. So it is a pejorative term to define underdeveloped economies. That's very important, and I reject that term. India is not third world, China is not third world, Japan is not third world. So you have to remember that part. It is the European-centric attitude of controlling the world just as they did during colonial era. Insofar as Mr. Trump is concerned, I live by my theory, and it has proven very right. Smart people make dumb mistakes. Smarter people make dumber mistakes. To treat India the manner that he is doing,
Mr. Jha.
In my opinion, that's my red line for him. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Jha. In fact, when you mention about that point about the West's issues and problems, that was also reiterated by the External Affairs Minister on multiple occasions, that the West's problem cannot be the world's problems, and the West needs to understand that. Whether that understanding comes about, in the US administration, that remains to be seen. But very interesting points that you've made about, alternate blocks that are emerging as far as geopolitics is concerned. And sir, I'll come back to you to discuss more on that. But let me go to Mr. Sabnawis, who's been waiting very patiently. Mr. Sabnawis, Mr. Jha was essentially mentioning about, how tariffs are a 20th century tool of imperialism, of colonialism, and how Donald Trump wants to shift supply chains and he wants to boost manufacturing in the United States, and which is why this tariffs policy is one of the measures that he's rolled out. But the bigger question is, can Donald Trump move supply chains so quickly when he looks at making in America?
No, absolutely not, because let's put the question this way, that today to make America great, he has imposed these tariffs. One of the reasons is that he would like all these goods to be produced in America. Now, if it was possible to produce these goods in America at an economical cost, it would have been done a long time back. The very fact that any country is importing from others, it follows the simple economic principle of comparative advantage. You produce those goods in which you have a comparative advantage, others do it, then accordingly that's the basis for foreign trade taking place. So I think this particular measure is a very, very odd way of trying to make America great again, because what he's going to do, one is that he's going to destroy this entire process of global trade. That's number one, which is happening. Two, lots of countries are going to just start thinking about how to counter these particular tariffs internally, because even for countries like UK or the European Union, which have struck deals at 10 or 15%, it is much higher than what it was earlier. And America is definitely going to pay the price finally, because if you're importing all goods at a minimum of 10% or 15% or 20%, that would automatically mean that your domestic inflation is something which is going to go high. And we have seen that Donald Trump has not spared the Federal Reserve Chief. He has been having these tirades against him, asking him to lower rates. Now, logically, one cannot do it if your inflation is going to be high. So I think it's a lot of disruption which has been caused rather irrationally, I would say. And I do not think that this entire objective of making America great again is going to be achieved through tariffs. And tariffs is definitely not the instrument to use for growing any economy. It has never worked in the past. In fact, free trade is something which has helped countries grow, not restrictive trades.
Right. Before I quickly go on to Mr. Jha, we're also getting word that India and Russia have signed a protocol to deepen industrial and technological cooperation. And the fact that this comes in even as Trump's additional 25% tariffs have been making headlines is quite telling, in the fact that it also aligns pretty much with the Indian position that the country will continue to look out for its own strategic and economic interests. So, Mr. Jha, coming to you now. What do you make of all the investment that India, and when I say investment, I'm talking about the imagery and the grand gestures of bonhomie between both these countries, manifested largely through its larger-than-life leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. What becomes of all of that in context of these recent developments that have admittedly been simmering for quite a while now? And given the fact that India is now doubling down on its relationship with Russia, what do you think will become of the Indo-US relationship at this time and place?
Thank you. I'm very hopeful. Let me put it this way to you. I have right from the beginning, up to 2014, I supported Mr. Modi. 2016, I supported Mr. Trump. And I have always opined, and I believe, that both these countries have so much commonality of purpose between them that, and I call India and United States the world's two most prominent democracies, facing identical or if not similar challenges. So the question here is why this is happening. I believe this will change. Although it is fashionable these days to trash Mr. Trump, but I'm saying that he's a very smart guy. He's doing something in order to achieve something else. To use that Hindi phrase, kahin pe nigaah, kahin pe nishana, wali baat hai. So what I'm also seeing is that the commonality of purpose between the two countries is too many for them to ignore each other. But there is an element of disappointment, and there's a big element of disappointment, which these two smart people will have to begin to deal with it. And that is, during Mr. Trump's inaugural, Mr. Jaishankar was seated right in the front row in White House when the swearing-in ceremony was happening. A lot was talked about expectations from India. Mr. Modi was amongst the first few heads of government to be invited to White House for expectation of trade deal. But there is an Indian psyche that we take time in taking decision. Mr. Trump is a man in a hurry. So here was a clear clash in the operating styles of two prominent leaders. Trump wanted India to sign up as it wanted. Modi was a deliberate man. He is a deliberate man. He doesn't take decisions in a hurry. You have seen the way he operates. As a result of which, there was that mismatch between their expectations and desires. So what is happening here is, blanketing India not to deal with Russia was a wrong call. And I have said this in my conversations with people, that when you elect to sleep with my enemy, and I'm naming the enemy called Pakistan, who wants nothing else but destruction of India as its sole purpose of existence, when you sleep with Pakistan, don't tell me who I want to be friends with. And that's what I have also conveyed to the Republican leadership, that you have
Absolutely.
to mend your ways.
Absolutely,
You
Mr.
have to
Jha.
mend your ways. You can't ask India not to be friends with other countries in the world just because they are not your good friends. But remember one thing very important. Trump knows the importance of Russia. He was guided by the philosophy of Stephen Cohen, who was the Russian expert, who in a forum where I was there said that he totally disagreed with Trump being a Republican. He was a New York Democrat. He said, but he is right about Russia because there is no other option but two nuclear powers to be friends. So Trump did make those initiatives. Putin did respond.
Absolutely.
And Stephen Cohen, of all the people, blamed Democratic Party because they wanted to buttonhole Russia in a bind. And that's the reason why these conflicts are happening. There is somewhere along the line, India will not be hit hard by these tariffs because we are not an export nation. The total estimate is that with all things considered, there will be 0.3 or 0.2 percentage dip in India's GDP. That's not cataclysmic. That is not going to hurt India big time. But America will be hit because suddenly you will find, and we also must not get hyper, that 50% tariff, but Switzerland has more than 50. There are many other countries which are happening. That's why I go back to my belief. It's a geopolitical play of managing production, manufacturing, what do you call manipulation of use of resources. And that's the bigger play here. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Jha. And a calculated approach is something that India needs to look at, and perhaps it will look at, given the measured stance that India has presented on several occasions. When you mention about the two leaders actually meeting earlier this year and setting that $500 billion off target by the end of this decade, it remains to be seen, whether that will be fulfilled or not. But let me ask you another point. You were talking about how, Indians are disappointed because India bows to none. That's been the larger messaging that's gone out over the past 1 week or 10 days. But what's the mood amongst the Indian diaspora in the United States? And do you anticipate any larger implications perhaps on the H-1B visas to come up from the US administration?
I see a clear anti-India stance in America. It's driven not only by anti-India, it's also driven because we are goddamn Hindus, as they call it. But this is the moment you do not react in a hyper sentimental, emotional way. For your benefit, I coined the new word called sentimotional by bringing sentimental and emotional together. We don't need to be sentimotional about an issue. We have to be really calm, cool, calculated, and very collected in our response. So H1B, it has been globalized as if it is India related. But we are trying to market, we're trying to tell them that H1B is not an India issue, centric issue, just because you give more visas to India because of the STEM related education part of it. It is Indians are being targeted by every segment of the political system in America, as if we are the villains of the piece. And to that end, I would definitely want the government of India and the leadership of India also to step in, that we are not the villains of the piece here. There are others who are. We are as one senator once told me, that we love you Indians as immigrants to this country because you are educated, you are professionals, you work hard, you are in the highest median income, you are not a law and order problem, you have family values, you take care of your children, and you ask for nothing. The asking for nothing has hurt us. And that's why you are seeing now greater involvement and engagement by the Indian community. People like us are leading that effort. So what I'm trying to tell Indians is get involved in the communities that you live in. Because if you do not get involved, despite being very successful, you have no clout. And if you have no clout, nobody listens to you. That's the message which Indian community has figured out. There is a tremendous disappointment about Trump singling out India for a preferential treatment, if I may say so. But I would say remain calm, don't hyperventilate, and be careful about your responses to that. This is not the time to throw your arms and legs about. This is a time to really kind of be in a crisis situation. To give the example of the last cricket match at Oval, if India had become nervous, we would have lost, but you kept the calm, you kept the cool, and you played the game, and you won. That's the way to go about it. I love to bring sports analogies in these matters because it teaches a lot. And that's what is critical for us here. Yeah.
Right, right. No, I quite like the cricketing analogy, Mr. Jha. Keep calm, much like the Indian cricket team did at the Oval Test match, which it won narrowly. And no doubt a measured approach to the additional tariffs would certainly be prudent as much as the Indian side would like to take a more hardline approach, buoyed, of course, by a lot of calls for same. But in keeping with the response from the Indian side to what is no doubt an unprecedented development, I'm also joined by Times Network's Srinjoy Chowdhury, who joins us from the very latest in terms of the additional Trump tariff and the Indian response to that. Srinjoy, what are you picking up from the ground?
Well, first of all, President Donald Trump says different things at different times. Now, is this the first throw of the dice, or is this the bottom line? That is something that has to be worked out. And that can be worked out when that negotiating team arrives. If negotiating team arrives and then we begin negotiations, then there is a chance that this could well be the first throw of the dice. Now, remember the case with China. The tariff levels touched the roof. They were over 150%. And now things have got sorted out. So there's entirely a possibility that Trump does these things to harrow people into arriving at a decision. Now, if, as the previous speaker said, if you're cool and you negotiate the way you can, then very clearly it can be of great help. The important point is to work out if this is the final assessment of the United States, or is this something that could change tomorrow morning?
Right. Thank you very much, Srinjoy, for bringing us all of those details. But if you could also give us some perspective on what really happened with respect to NSA Ajit Doval's visit to Russia and, of course, those talks. Are we picking up anything as far as those talks are concerned?
Ajit Doval is the national security advisor. And naturally, Russia is an important country, is an important friend, is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And it's only natural that he will visit Russia. He has many friends there. And he has to keep in touch with everybody. Now, very clearly, there is a Putin visit also planned later in the year. So all of these things put together, it's important that India keeps in touch with the Russians. And Doval's visit is a clear example of the fact that India and Russia continue to have good ties. We may have disagreements on one or two things, but the national security advisor and his Russian counterparts are very good friends. And as a result, this conversation with the Russians go on.
Right, and even as that conversation with the Russians go on, the fact remains that India continues to seek out its own national and economic interests vis-a-vis the additional Trump tariffs. But Srinjoy, if I could also ask you very quickly, in terms of the Indian side, do you feel a very clear, no-holds-barred approach will be the way forward with regard to India reacting to these tariffs, and India will in fact double down on its stoic stance that it's been taking in the recent past with regard to its response to the US and these additional tariffs?
First of all, India will have to explain more clearly to the Americans that the petrol we buy from Russia, America itself has said in the past that when India buys Russian crude, refines and sells it to America, America designates it as Indian petroleum. Now, what happened to that? Also, America had said in the past, because India buys Russian crude, the price of crude in the world market stays down. Now, this is what America had told us. Now, why this volte-face? That's the first thing. Secondly, the fact that we buy Russian crude is primarily because of two reasons. One, this war with Ukraine has meant that prices of food grain, fertilizer, and fuel have shot up. And India is a country of 140 crore people, and also per capita income of about $3,000. Now, that cannot be wished away. Now, it's important for the Indian government to do its best for its own people, which is why, because Russian oil is cheaper, India can look towards it and buy it.
Right, Srinjoy, thank you very much for sharing those details and, of course, putting into perspective this entire development. And we're given to understand from the Kremlin that US-Russia talks were constructive as a ceasefire deadline looms. So on one side, the United States is essentially telling India not to do energy trade with Russia. On the other hand, it's trying to broker peace between Ukraine and Russia. Whether that comes about or not, that remains to be seen. But clearly, India will protect its interests so far as these tariffs are concerned, ladies and gentlemen. And let's now also take a quick look at the Wall Street and how it's shaping up. Well, we're seeing all three indices trading in the green. Well, the Dow Jones is up by a massive over 140 points in trade. The tech-heavy NASDAQ is also in the green, and that's up by over 200 points in trade. The S&P 500 is also up by close to 50 points in trade. And of course, we did see what's really supporting these gains on Wall Street, and particularly the NASDAQ. Announcement from a White House official who confirmed that the iPhone maker is going to boost its investments into domestic manufacturing by $100 billion. Now, Apple has announced that investment, and Donald Trump has been asking Apple to increase its manufacturing footprint in the United States. But will it have ramifications for India, or will it stay committed to the Indian market as it has over these past many years? That remains to be seen. But ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time that we have for you on this broadcast. Thanks for watching.